another Killerplanes video.
Hey there, potential pilot people. This is Steve from Killerplanes, and we're here with our first lesson on the simulator. This is a lesson for novices, and first we're going to do some chatting about some basic things that have to do with RC flight as I see it. And we're going to show you some flying, and then we're going to show you a lesson to practice on your simulator. And all this is based around our basic principle that we teach for flying, which is muscle memory. If you teach yourself muscle memory in your hands, that will replace for you the necessity of situational awareness that you get while you're actually sitting in a plane. You know, if your wings are banked to the left and you're sitting in the thing, you know which way you have to bank them to flatten your wings out. But if you're standing on the ground, it's a little more difficult. So you have to get your hands to remember that stuff. And once you do, you're going to be in like Flint, as they say, because when your hand is flying the plane, you are pretty much an observer, just deciding where you want the plane to be or stuff like that, and what maneuvers you'd like it to do. And if you're into the idea of flying RC, I highly recommend it because it's basically like having your own air show. If you dig air shows, then you might really dig the idea of being the boss of the air show and the guys in the tower and the pilots and the audience and everybody rolled into one. You're the whole air show. You're flying the plane and deciding what you want it to do and watching it and having a whole load of fun. And it's a lot cheaper than real planes. And I'll tell you, in my early days, when I discovered a few things about specific birds and why they did what they did, it's pretty easy to figure it out once you're doing things with a plane and this and that happens and you go, oh, that's why birds do that. And you learn things. And another thing is when you do go to an air show again and you see some fancy flying, if you've gotten to that point, flying RC planes, like doing 3D flying and whatnot, you'll know what they're doing, which is really cool. You can watch somebody doing some really cool trick flying and you go, I know what he's doing to make the plane do that. Personally, I can do some of that stuff with RC planes. I can't imagine how people can deal with sitting in a plane while it's doing that, but hey. I get to stand on the ground. So check this plane out. This is a Corsair in the Apple simulator, which is called the Icarus Aerofly. And there are simulators like Real Flight, and I can't remember the Spectrum one's name, available for PCs. And they're all pretty much the same as this. They have these super realistic planes. Look at the finish on this thing and the reflections and whatnot. These reflections are even this background, like whatever background you're flying in, that's what the reflections are on the airplanes. It's really amazing. These things are cool. God's gift to the RC pilot. What you do is you learn how to use this thing here to control that thing there, and you do it on a simulator on your computer, and you'll save yourself a lot of money, a lot of grief, and a lot of time while you're learning how to fly. Don't get me wrong, there's one simulator lesson, and it's this, basically. In simulators, planes want to fly, and in real life, planes want to crash, and that's the difference. So after you get really good in a simulator, you're still going to have a few problems when you start dealing with real planes in real life, but that's the way it is. At least this will make it a whole lot easier for you. And it's fun. And it's pretty affordable. If you have a decent computer, you can get a simulator even on eBay, let's say, for a really good price, like $100 to $150. Having one of these things will save you maybe $1,000 worth of planes. No kidding. That's not an exaggeration. So here we go. This is a Corsair. Like I said, I recommend using a plane kind of like this in a simulator because they fly a lot more gentle than the planes in real life. So this Corsair in the simulator pretty much mimics in a lot of ways the way, let's say, a Cessna does, maybe a 1400 millimeter FMS Cessna, that kind of plane. This plane in the simulator flies like that plane in real life. So you can use these. I wouldn't recommend getting a plane with retractable gear to learn how to fly on in real life because retractable gear are much more delicate and much more expensive to fix. So easier to break, more expensive and time consuming to fix. Let's learn on something else. What we recommend is a hand-launched belly land in the grass plane to learn on because it's all about approaches really when you're learning about landings. And you can learn approaches really well with a belly landing plane and not have to worry about wrecking any gear. That's what I did when I was learning. And I'll tell you, landing a plane on its wheels, especially on pavement, is really pretty much the most difficult thing that you can do with a plane. It's flying a plane at its most hazardous as far as flying conditions go and as far as how close to the ground you are. So, you know, it's the place where you're going to be doing your most crashes unless you really know how to handle a plane. Or one of the places you're going to be doing crashes. There are other places to do them as well because gravity always works. I'm not so sure about how good I am, but gravity is really good all the time. So here's this is a photo-based background that you're looking at. This is someplace in Germany. I'd like to fly here myself. And most of the backgrounds in these things are photo-based like this. They're 360 photo views. And there are some that are also 3D based, and the beauty of those is that you can fly behind like the plane. You can fly in the air with the plane along behind it like you're the wingman, but you're controlling the plane out in front of you that you're watching. And which is a good thing to practice. You get used to how much stick movement, you can see the sticks in the upper right of the screen there, how much you have to do to make the plane do what. So, by the way, speaking of stick movement, let's show you some of this stuff here. So we have ailerons, right? See them on the two wings. We have the elevator on the tail and the rudder on the tail. And of course, throttle. So that's the two sticks. The right stick is the same exact thing as the stick in a fighter. It's simply a stick that you push and pull on to move the plane around. You push the nose down or pull the nose up, or you bank left or bank right, and it more or less acts kind of like a pencil, let's say, that's jammed into the top of your plane model. Or however you move that pencil, if it's jammed in there good, that's the way your plane is going to move. Push it forward, nose goes down. Push it left, the left wing goes down, etc. So that's what it does to the movement of your plane. The left stick is your rudder pedals. In a real plane, these are pedals. So left rudder is your left pedal, right rudder is your right pedal. And the throttle acts just like this does. It's a stick that you push forward in fighters anyways. So let's bring this back around because the wind's coming down from the other end. By the way, that expression, balls to the wall, there's a ball on the end of the throttle stick, and balls to the wall is not what you think it means. It means pushing that ball all the way forward to the dashboard, which means full throttle. And that's what the expression is from. Isn't that cute? So let's get this baby out here again. We're going to take off by feeding it some gas, throttle, and some rudder to keep it going straight down the runway. Let's make sure we have one click of flaps, and off we go. So I'm going to just take off and fly around while we talk about a few more things, and here's one of them. As you're flying, let's put the gear up and the flaps up. And your plane is out there, and there are some other things out there too. In this case, some trees. You don't want to fly across the trees visually. What you want to do is fly above them in the sky, the way that you see me doing here. And the reason is you pretty much can't tell a lot of times if you're the same distance, your plane, away as the tree is. So if you happen to be the same distance away from you as the tree is, your plane is going to crash into it. When I say if you're that distance away, what I mean is the plane you're flying. That's you in this instance. Right now, here's a good example of how different simulators are from real planes. I've had that throttle off since, a ways back, and I just let the plane coast in. And it would be really nice if a lot of planes flew like this. Some of them do, but for the most part, if I took the throttle off on any Corsair that I own, it would pretty much crash very soon after that. So right now, I got the throttle off again, right? I'm just coasting in here. That's pretty cool. So there's one of the differences. Just be aware that if you're doing that in a simulator, no, you can't really do it with a plane in real life. You're going to have to always have your throttle on to some extent, unless it's one of those big time coasting planes like the Hawkfighter that I fly all the time. So, we're going to show you a lesson. First, we're going to tell you what our method is all about. So, the method that we teach is muscle memory, as I said. Your hand wants to fly the plane, and your hand wants to remember what it did the last time it did something. So if it banked the plane left, like I'm doing now, then you need for your hand to remember that so that you don't have to remember it. So when it comes time to flatten your wings out, your hand knows to move the stick to the right, no matter what the plane looks like or where it is in the sky or what direction it's going. Now I'm going right, because that's the last thing my hand did. So in order to straighten my wings out, I have to bank them left, okay? So what I did was to train myself to do that by, once again, muscle memory. So personally, I flew alone for maybe my first 5 or 6 months. It didn't occur to me to go look for some other pilots or talk to somebody or anything, or maybe go on a forum because, I'm kind of dense that way. So I just basically taught myself how to fly without speaking to anyone. And this was the first thing that was major that I had to overcome. And that was the fact that you're crashing all the time because the plane's all, it's coming this way and you go to straighten your wings out, and most people do this, right? So they'll end up crashing the plane because when you do what it looks like you should do when the plane's coming at you, you're doing the backwards thing. And that's easy enough. You can learn a couple of tricks, like put your stick under the low wing when the plane's coming at you. So if this wing's down, you push the stick in that direction and it'll pick the wing up. And that's a good thing to know. It's a good trick to remember. But what about when the plane's going this way, and what about when the plane's going this way and all that stuff? So really, what we recommend is to learn how to fly with the muscle memory method. You do not need a gyro. You don't need one any more than I do. And look, I'm flying the plane around as if it had a gyro in it, right? So it doesn't. I'm the gyro, and that's all there is to it. So it's not a hard thing to do. It just takes a little practice. For me, after I figured out this method, I almost immediately stopped about 80% of my crashes because they were due to my inability to do the right thing at the right time when I was spiraling toward the ground or something. And after that, it only took me a short amount of time, maybe a couple of months of flying once a day, to teach myself a lot of aerobatics. And I'm kind of a bad case to use as an example because the lovely Denise seems to think that I was a fighter pilot in a previous life, and I don't really disagree with her because where else would you learn how to fly a plane like this? It seems that I already just knew what to do, and the big trick was learning to do it standing on the ground while the plane is in the sky. So it is fun, and the more that you understand about how planes fly and what they do to stay in the air and maneuver, the easier it will be for you to fly because you will understand truly what the plane is doing. So, all that said, let's talk about another couple of things. So, now you're the gyro and you're flying the plane and you're banking the wings to turn because that's how you need to turn a plane. When planes are flying, they're all designed so that the wings for that particular plane will lift the weight of that particular plane while it's going at a chosen particular speed, which is called the cruising speed. And basically, that's a bunch of things, but one of them is that the plane's going to go straight and level at that speed without too much input, because the plane's balanced like a seesaw. That's what the CG, center of gravity, you keep hearing about. It's the center point of the seesaw. We'll get to more of that later. And if your plane is balanced on your CG and it's trimmed so that it's not rolling in one direction or the other like this, then it'll just fly along straight and level at cruising speed because that's what they're balanced for. So, one of the components in this is that the lift of the wing is designed to lift the weight of the plane from gravity, right? So, the lift of the wing needs to equal the force of gravity on the plane in order to keep it up in the air like this. And that's what they do. And this is why this next thing happens. So you've got an amount of lift in your plane that's equal to the weight of the plane, and it's pointing straight away from the earth when your wings are level. So it keeps the plane in the air. When you tilt the wings, your lift factor is no longer pointing straight away from the earth. So what's going to happen is your plane is going to start to drop as you bank your wings. The more you bank them, the more the plane will drop because the lift is no longer pulling just away from gravity. Now it's pulling something away from gravity, but it's also pulling it in this direction. Because the tops of the wings are pointed in this direction, the lift helps turn the plane. And that's that. So if your wings are banked, you have to hold your nose up to keep from doing this. I'm going to bank my wings and not hold the nose up. See what happens? It just starts diving. Once I flatten my wings back out, stops diving at that speed, right? So when I bank my wings, let's let it get back into balance. Let's start flying along level first. There we go. We're flying level. We bank our wings, and the plane goes down. So you're going to counter that by gently holding your nose up. The more that your wings are banked, the more you have to pull back on the stick to hold the nose up to not dive. So if you're doing a banking turn like this, you're always basically gently holding the nose up so the plane won't dive the slight bit that it does when it's in a slight bank like this. And when you're doing a climbing turn, let's say, which is called a chandelle, then what you do is you bank your wings and you pull your nose up a little bit too much, and the plane will turn and climb like it's doing now. See, I'm getting further away from the ground there. And if you want to do a diving turn, conversely, pretty much just stop holding your nose up or hold it up less and bank your wings, and the plane will just dive and turn just naturally. Another thing to keep in mind is that when you are flying your plane, when you bank your wings, they're pretty much going to stay banked because planes are kind of balanced to do that. So I'm not doing anything now. I already banked my wings. They're kind of staying banked. Gradually, the plane will level itself back out if they're not banked too much. If they're banked a lot, gradually the plane will just dive into the ground like this. But if they're just banked a little bit, like a tad, then it's likely that the plane will flatten its wings back out by itself over a period of time. That said, you need to be the thing that flattens the wings out. So, hence the muscle memory. So, now let's teach you the muscle memory trick the way that I teach it. Basically, we call it chanting your turn. So, if you're flying along, what you want to do is say out loud the bank that you just did, and then keep chanting that to yourself just to remind yourself that that's the bank that you're in or that you've done, right? You're not supposed to say it and keep doing it. You're supposed to just say it to remind yourself in order to know what to do when you want to flatten your wings out, which is the opposite of what you'll be chanting. So my method, as you started out, sounds like this. I bank my wings left and I go left, 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 left. And then I know to say right to straighten out. So I would literally say that once I figured this out. I just chanted it out loud. And like I say, I pretty much immediately stopped crashing from not doing the right thing. Like now I'm in a left turn and I know to go right to straighten my wings out. If I did what the plane looks like in that case, I would immediately flip it over and dive into the ground, which is what almost all novices do. So this is the way to avoid doing that. And it doesn't take long. It took me about a month of doing this chanting out loud, and then I did it in my head silently for maybe another month. And then one day I was flying around with a Corsair, as a matter of fact, and noticed that I wasn't doing it anymore. And at that point, I knew that my hand had learned that it was doing its own chanting, as it were. So my hand was remembering what to do. Now that it made a right bank, it already knows that. So it knows to juggle that right bank, whether I want a little more right or a little less. And it also knows to go left to flatten my wings out like that. So no matter what I do at this point, I've been doing this for a number of years, my hand always knows what it did last. And even if it's a while since I did anything, there's another point about flying RC planes. It's not constantly doing things. What you do is put your plane into an attitude like this attitude that's going to get the plane to a place that you want it to be. So I wanted it to be in a diving turn. I just kind of banked my wings, stopped pulling my nose up, and let it do its thing. I'm, maybe doing a little adjustments to the bank or something, but not very much. Another thing to keep in mind, if you already drive a car, think of how you drive a car when you're controlling it. You're not slamming your steering wheel around to go around a curve in a road. You might slam your steering wheel around a little bit to go around a sharp corner, but if you're just going around some gentle curves like this, you're doing tiny little movements on your steering wheel. So it's the same thing pretty much with the stick while you're controlling an airplane. There's one huge difference. When you're driving a car, you got wheels on the ground, rubber on the road, and when you make an adjustment, there's an immediate direct solid contact to something, tires to the road, that makes your car, you make it turn a little bit, it just turns, right? You turn the wheel. Not the same thing in a plane. There's a bunch of other factors involved: wind, the speed of the plane, updrafts, downdrafts, all kinds of things that are involved. So the point is that you're supposed to be doing little movements to do turns and whatnot, but if the plane does not respond the way you want it to, do not be afraid to whack the stick over. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't need to do it then, but when I did do it then, it whacked the plane over. But sometimes you need to whack the stick over just to get the plane to move at all in the direction you want it to. So don't be afraid to do that. That said, don't fight your plane. So if your plane is heavily going left and you want it to go right, and you can't seem to stop it from going left, go left. right? Because something might be wrong. And I found out the hard way to do that by putting a brand spanking new plane into the top of a tree that I couldn't get it out of because the plane was trying to go right. I was trying to go left. If I had just gone right like the plane wanted to and tightened up the turn it was already doing, I would have been able to keep it out of that tree that it went into. But since it was going right and I was trying to make it go left, basically all I did was widen up the right hand turn so that it ended up in a tree, like way out there in the top of a tree. And that was that. So I learned that day, Steve, if the plane's going right, maybe you should help it go right, so you could keep it away from the tree. At least you'll be paying attention to that direction. And I learned something that day, so maybe you can learn it right now. That said, other than that, you want to make the plane do what you want to do. Remember, you're the spectator at the air show, and you're also the air show pilot, and you're the boss of the whole airfield if you're alone there. And you can make the plane do what you want it to do. So one of the things that I wanted to learn how to do was to fly around and do turns close to the ground like this, right? So turn from one direction to the other while not really climbing too much. Whoa! Put that wing in, but I managed to keep the plane in the air. I think I was dragging the wing in the grass there a bit. And so let's come down here. I'm going to bring this in for landing. I'm going to take off again, and we're going to go into the first lesson. So the first lesson is something you're going to be doing on a simulator rather than in real life, because they frown on you flying around yourself in circles, which is what the lesson is. If you're at a club like this one, this is a photograph of an actual club, right? So if I was flying in circles, I'd be over here like this, and I'm out over the people and over their cars and over their expensive planes and their kids and everything, and they do not appreciate that. You're not supposed to fly over people and stuff like that. It's not a good idea, because these planes can crash. As I tell our customers when they're buying planes, when you buy a $300 plane that's just gorgeous and flies beautifully and everything, there are no $100 servos in that thing. All the servos cost $2, which means they might fail, and they do a lot. So you're flying along and all of a sudden the plane just goes like this because one of the servos went out of whack all by itself and made the plane do that, and there's nothing you can do about it. It happens quite a bit. So you don't want that happening over the parking lot, do you? So that's why you don't fly in circles. On the simulator, no problem. You can crash into those photos of cars all you want. And notice that when you crash in the simulator, like I just did, they give you a new plane on the runway right away. I love that. It's not like that in real life. That's why you want to learn on the simulator and do a lot of crashing there, because in real life, you got to go pick up the pieces and fix it or buy a new one and start again. So let's take off and show you the first lesson. What's going to happen is you'll take off, and by the way, when you're flying and you do crash and they do give you the new plane on the runway, you got to remember to put your gears down with the lever in case it's a retractable gear plane, because if your lever is not down, you can't pick the gear back up after you take off. And also put your flaps down. So that's full flaps, that's half flaps. See those flaps there on the bottom of the wing? There they are. And so now I got my flaps and my gear lever down, and I can take off. So I just feed some throttle, feed some rudder to keep it straight, and off we go. And then I'm going to turn left. Okay, so I'm banking left, and I'm going to do our little trick. I chant to myself, left, 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 to remind myself that I'm in a left turn. Left, 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 and then right to flatten out my wings. That'll get me further away from myself, so I'll turn left again, left, left, left. Let's put the gear and the flaps up. Why not? See them go up there? And Now I'm left, 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 right to straighten out. And then I'll turn around and go the other way. Right, 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 left to straighten out. Okay, so a little more of that. I'm already going right. So I'll bank right again to go in a circle to the right. So I'm going right, 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 left to straighten out a little bit to keep the distance from myself. Let's bank it right again. Right, 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 left to straighten out. So that's the chanting, and that's how you do it. And this is the lesson. You're just going to fly around yourself in circles at a chosen altitude and a chosen distance from yourself. So, what you want to do is maintain the radius of your circle so that the plane's always the same distance from you. Maintain the altitude that it's at. So you don't want your circle getting a whole lot smaller all by itself because your bank is too tight like this. You don't, in other words, you don't want to be turning in toward yourself. You want to be going around yourself in a circle like this, right? And then keep the bank what it needs to be in order to go around that circle by juggling your wings a little bit. If you're banked to the left like this and you want to tighten that turn up to keep the radius small and not get further away from yourself, you're going to need to give it a little more left bank. And if you're tightening too much, you're going to need to give it a little bit of right nudge on your stick. Otherwise, if you notice on the sticks in the upper right hand corner, unless I'm doing those nudgings, that stick is centered. The wings are banked. I'm just flying along. I've already banked the wings, and they're pretty much going to stay like that with a little bit of help from me. So I fly along at this chosen distance and chosen altitude in both directions. And the reason for the two directions is that pretty much everyone has a weak side. For me, it was the right side, and it's been pretty much evenly spaced between right and left for any students that we've had. So what that means is that I could fly to the left like this a lot, no problem, when I was first starting out. But if I turned around and tried flying to the right around myself in a circle, I would crash immediately, pretty much every time. And it's just that I couldn't quite balance my hand with the plane going in that direction for some reason. And it's pretty much like that with everybody. So you're going to have to find out what your weak side is, and then whatever side that you're flying along in and that you crash in, you keep flying that direction until your crashes stop happening all the time. So you got to learn to balance the plane going in both directions visually. I guess it's the two halves of the brain kind of a thing. And once you've gotten that down, which might, as I recall, for me, that took days and days of doing simple stuff like this, like just going around in circles, to stop myself from crashing going to the right all the time. And I finally was able to stop myself from crashing like that and got myself balanced out so that I could fly in either direction. And that's basically the first thing that you have to overcome so that you can fly in both directions with aplomb, as it were. And as much as you can practice approaches and landings to your heart's content in a simulator, because blowing up the gear in a simulator costs you nothing. They'll just give you a new plane. But like I say, in real life, we highly recommend using a hand-launched belly land plane to do most of your learning on. Yeah, baby. Because once you've learned how to fly planes like this, then you can take out one of these planes like a Corsair and fly it this way, the way these planes were meant to be flown. Yanking and banking, as they call it, like the way that these things would be flown in a dogfight. Somebody's on your tail and you're trying to shake them off. And you have to do things to be able to do that. You know what I'm saying? You got to learn how to maneuver that plane and how to make it move through the sky the way that you want it to. And whoa, there goes that wing. What was that? And that's why I end up still crashing a lot 10 years later, because I like to fly like somebody's trying to kill me. Or as they say, fly like you stole it. And occasionally you get yourself into trouble doing that. And that's the reason that I never fly a non-reinforced plane. These EPO foam planes are quite easy to reinforce with carbon fiber rods and tubes to make them so much stronger that hearing the numbers makes you think that I'm throwing the bull around. But you can reinforce these things so that they're 15 or 20 times stronger in the nose and wings and other various parts of the plane. It's really kind of amazing how well it works. So that's what I always do. I like to, planes to bounce, as it were. So let's do this one more time. We're just going to take off, show you how this works. And once again, if you can see something in the sky, if you can see something sticking up in the sky, you want to avoid flying visually across it in your field of vision. And there's another big reason. You might be behind that object distance-wise. So you're further away than the tree is, and you know that. So you don't feel too bad about flying behind the tree for a second. Well, there might be another tree back there that's just as tall as that one is visually, meaning if it's further away from you, it can be even taller and sticking up to the same point in the sky as far as your eyes are concerned. And if you're behind the tree that you can see, you can hit a tree that you can't see. So it's just good to stay up in the sky above the stuff that you can see. Another thing that you might want to keep in mind is that in simulators, you don't have peripheral vision. In real life you do, so you can always see the ground that you're standing on. In a simulator, you'll notice that if I get up high enough in the sky, I can't see the ground at all anymore. So it's much more difficult to tell where the plane is, like whether it's right over your head or if it's a mile away, and then that makes it more difficult to tell which way the plane is going and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's a good thing in simulators to keep the ground in view, and if you crash, who cares? They'll just give you another plane and you get to practice a takeoff, and that's all there is to it. But in real life, you want to fly what they call 2 mistakes high. So you want to be up here when you're flying a real plane, maybe 100 or 150 feet off the ground. And until you really learn how to control a plane, that's the safe place to be, which is, one of the reasons that it's not really the best idea to learn to fly a plane that you have to land on wheels, because when you're trying to land a plane on wheels, you're not in a safe place anymore. You're down close to the ground, going really slow, and you might just pop some wheels off your plane doing that. And look at how gorgeous these things are. Plus, in a simulator, you can fly them right by your head if you feel like it. And that's that. So do your chanting, do your going around yourself in circles until you can go in either direction and not crash your plane. And then we'll move on to lesson number 2, where we start doing basically the next thing, which is flying the way that you need to fly at a club. So once you can fly around yourself in circles, the next thing to do is to learn how to fly around out there. So let's say you're always on that side of the runway as far as you're concerned. Your plane is not going to go around you. It's always going to be out in this direction somewhere, looking across the runway. And that's the next thing. You want to learn how to fly around yourself, and then learn how to fly around out there. And then you're going to learn how to always bring your plane home, which is the big important thing in RC flying. You always have to be able to get your plane back to where you are. After that, you can worry about how to get it back down to the ground. First, you got to make sure that it doesn't fly away. So we're going to land this thing again. I'm going to put 2 clicks of flaps. Look at that climb. Okay, let's take the throttle all the way off and turn this away because I'm pretty sure the runway is over here. Yes, okay. All right, put the gear down. No, look, leave the flaps down. Put the gear. Whoa! What was that? I think I've not balanced the plane properly, or trimmed it, I mean. All right. So let's get it down on the runway like that. There you go. And that's it. Lesson number 1. Come back for lesson number 2. If you think this was good, like it, subscribe, do all those crazy things. Tell your friends about it. And we'll be back with more. Seriously, you get into this, right? You'll get one of these planes, and then you'll be dreaming about, if I could just shrink myself down and get in that thing. Oh, yeah. Next time, have a good one. Steve from Killerplanes saying goodbye. See you on the flight line.
Woohoo!